My wife betrayed me by having an affair with my business partner and subsequently left me to be with him. However, after he ended the relationship with her, she attempted to reach out to me, appearing remorseful and tearful. My ex-wife, Kathy, a 38-year-old woman, and I, also 38, had been together for 19 years, with 16 of those years spent in marriage. Together, we raised a 14-year-old daughter. Nearly 6 months ago, Kathy decided to leave everything behind to be with Leon, my former business partner. To clarify, Leon had previously sold his shares and exited the company after I uncovered his affair with Kathy. Leon and I had a professional relationship that blossomed into a strong friendship. This camaraderie led us to quit our respective jobs and launch a business together, a venture we had nurtured for the past 5 years. Unbeknownst to me until recently, Leon had been involved with Kathy for 3 of those years. About 6 months ago, I stumbled upon evidence of their affair through some messages on Kathy's phone. When I confronted her about it, she didn't attempt to deny the affair. Instead, she admitted to it wholeheartedly, explaining that she was exhausted from maintaining secrets and simply wanted to leave. This revelation left me shattered, especially since I was completely unaware of her dissatisfaction in our marriage. I had always been willing to do whatever it took to mend our relationship. The day I confronted Kathy about the affair, she informed me of her decision to leave. In a moment of desperation, I foolishly suggested that we could still salvage our marriage. However, she became increasingly irritated with my attempts to reconcile. She revealed that the primary reason she married me was her pregnancy and her fear of being alone. Despite her efforts to love me over the past 16 years, it hadn't worked out, and she had found someone she genuinely loved. Determined not to let me hinder her happiness, she insisted that now that I knew about the affair, I needed to accept the situation and let her go. My heartbreak was profound, especially concerning our daughter, but Kathy didn't hesitate to leave. She promptly filed for divorce with a straightforward petition, seeking only to exit the marriage without demanding any settlements or alimony. The division of our assets was handled fairly, allowing us to finalize the divorce within a few months. I eventually came to realize that repairing our marriage was impossible after everything that had transpired. Following the divorce filing, I also confronted Leon. He apologized, explaining that he had intended to confess the affair long ago but didn't know how to approach me. Within weeks, Leon resigned from the company and informed me that he and Kathy would be relocating to avoid causing me further distress. Kathy had secured an impressive job opportunity in Boston, and Leon's cousin resided there, providing him with a new work arrangement. Leon communicated all these details through an email, and after that, our communication ceased entirely. The last time I saw Kathy was 2 months ago on the day our divorce was finalized. Since then, I hadn't heard from either of them, and life became challenging for both my daughter and me. Despite the hardships, we managed to persevere, partly because I still had my business to focus on, which kept me occupied. My primary motivation was to ensure that my daughter had the future she deserved. However, about a week ago, Kathy resurfaced, leaving me uncertain about whether my daughter and I had made the right choices. On that particular evening, around 11 p.m., someone urgently rang our doorbell and knocked persistently. By that time, my daughter was already in bed, and I was wrapping up some work in my office. Both of us hurried to the door, and through the window, we recognized Kathy. My daughter advised me against opening the door because their relationship was strained. Despite having partial custody, Kathy had made little effort to maintain contact with our daughter, and the affair had left a lasting negative impression on her. Nevertheless, I sensed that Kathy's unexpected visit at such a late hour must have been significant, so I decided to let her in. However, instead of entering calmly, she began yelling at me from the doorstep. She threatened to file a lawsuit against me, insisting that the matter be taken to court so she could receive what she was rightfully owed. She accused me of wanting to punish her, claiming that I had concealed Leon's true character from her to retaliate for her infidelity. Initially, I was baffled by her accusations and asked her to slow down and provide more details. She remained visibly angry and insisted there was no need for me to feign ignorance. According to her, I had deliberately hidden Leon's true nature because I wanted to punish her for cheating. To support her claim, she rolled up her sleeve to reveal a spot on her arm covered by a band-aid, suggesting that Leon had harmed her in some way. This revelation was shocking to me, as I had known Leon professionally for many years and had never witnessed any aggressive behavior from him. Kathy explained that since moving to Boston, she and Leon had been arguing frequently. Leon was struggling to adjust to their new life, and despite spending a month there, he blamed Kathy for the difficulties they faced. He accused her of ruining his life by revealing the affair prematurely, forcing him to leave the business he had invested so much in, and having to work with his cousin, who constantly undermined him. Their disputes escalated every night, and the night before she visited us, Leon became furious and threw a vase at Kathy. Although she tried to dodge it, the vase still struck her arm, causing a cut. Previously, Leon had only verbally abused her, but this incident marked a significant escalation. Kathy had left their home that night and taken the next available flight to come and talk to me about the situation. She mentioned that Leon hadn't bothered to contact or apologize to her after she left, and she held me responsible, believing that I was aware of his abusive behavior but chose to hide it to punish her. This accusation seemed unfounded to me, as I had only known Leon in a professional capacity and had never been involved in his personal life. I felt irritated by her implication that I owed her something or that I had intentionally misled her. I attempted to explain that I had no knowledge of Leon's personal issues and expressed my sympathy for what she was going through, emphasizing that the situation was her own responsibility. She continued to argue, insisting that I knew all about Leon's behavior and that she was fighting for what was rightfully hers following our divorce. Throughout this confrontation, my daughter stood by the door, and I momentarily forgot about her due to the intensity of the argument. Eventually, my daughter intervened, telling Kathy to leave and stay out of their conflict since she wasn't old enough to understand the complexities of the situation. She scolded Kathy, reminding her that since discovering the affair, Kathy had failed as both a wife and a mother by neglecting to visit or maintain contact with our daughter, instead prioritizing Leon and her new life. My daughter, though only 14, demonstrated remarkable maturity by defending me and refusing to allow Kathy to manipulate the situation. Kathy was left speechless by our daughter's words, and my daughter asserted that with Kathy now gone and with Leon, she would have to handle whatever issues she was facing on her own. She firmly stated that our family was no longer intact and that Kathy had brought this upon herself. After my daughter slammed the door in Kathy's face, Kathy cried outside, but I chose not to check on her, feeling that it was unnecessary after our heated discussion. I returned to bed, attempting to distance myself from the emotional turmoil, and focused on keeping busy with work. I felt immense pride in my daughter for standing up for me and not letting Kathy undermine me. Life began to stabilize after that visit, but just 3 days ago, Kathy returned, this time accompanied by a lawyer seeking full custody of our daughter. Fortunately, our daughter was out with friends that evening, so I hadn't informed her about the visit yet. I was furious when Kathy arrived, claiming that after our daughter's confrontation with her, she had decided she could no longer allow our daughter to live with me. Kathy explained that her previous lack of contact was an attempt to avoid a prolonged custody battle and to minimize further disruption to my life. She contended that her absence was a considerate gesture for my sake, not an attempt to shirk responsibility. I wasn't convinced by her explanation and argued that her true motive was to quickly leave and start anew with Leon, rather than genuinely caring about my well-being. Kathy dismissed my skepticism, declaring that she no longer cared about my opinions because she was now determined to gain full custody of our daughter. She threatened to take the matter to court, alleging that our daughter had been disrespectful towards her and that I was encouraging such behavior. Kathy insisted that she knew what needed to be done to secure custody, leaving my daughter and me with no choice but to comply. In response, I told her to leave, expressing my unwillingness to engage further and refused to waste time arguing with her. However, this incident left me questioning whether I had made the right choices regarding how I handled the situation with my daughter. I wanted to believe that I was doing the right thing, but uncertainty lingered, especially regarding my decision not to reprimand my daughter for her behavior towards her mother. In my first update following these events, I chose not to express any remorse, asserting that my daughter had acted correctly by standing up for me. Her comments made me realize the extent of my naivety, as Kathy had indeed betrayed me. I felt no sympathy or regret for Kathy's actions. Many people advised me to communicate with my daughter beforehand to ensure she wasn't caught off guard in the event of Kathy pursuing full custody after their last encounter. Consequently, I spoke with my daughter, sharing all the details and refusing to keep any secrets from her. She had already demonstrated sufficient maturity to handle the situation, and while I felt some guilt over her having to grow up so quickly, I now felt prepared to support her in the future. As of that update, Kathy and Leon had not contacted us, but we anticipated hearing from them soon. Our daughter, being 14, was considered mature enough to have her opinions considered in court. If we could resolve matters through mediation, that would be ideal, but I ensured that our daughter genuinely wished to remain with me, which she affirmed. She clearly stated that she wanted nothing to do with Kathy at that time, though she might consider reconnecting with her in the future. Currently, everything was too recent, and our daughter blamed Kathy for the family's breakup. I refrained from interfering, not wanting to manipulate our daughter's feelings against her mother out of spite. Given the circumstances, there was little I could do, as Kathy had effectively alienated our daughter from her mother, reversing their previously close relationship. Kathy was understandably upset that our daughter sided with me, especially since she had always attempted to maintain a closer bond with her. Additionally, some of you were curious about who informed our daughter of the affair. It wasn't me. Kathy herself had confessed to our daughter through an email a few days after moving out, without consulting me first. Our daughter was deeply hurt upon learning this and expressed a desire to speak with her mother, but Kathy refused, citing her busy schedule with the divorce and deeming the matter inappropriate for discussion. She had conveyed everything she wanted to say in that initial email and offered nothing more. Despite my efforts to encourage Kathy to talk to our daughter and address her questions, Kathy remained steadfast in her decision, ceasing all communication with us thereafter. This led to a complete shift in our daughter's perception of her mother, a burden I felt was unfair to place solely on me. Nevertheless, I consulted my lawyer, and we prepared to address the situation legally. In an update 2 days ago, I received the official notice for full custody from Kathy. My lawyer and I promptly contested the petition, and we were scheduled to meet with a court-appointed mediator the following day. Unexpectedly, Leon reached out to me, expressing a desire for me to help Kathy return to him. He mentioned that he had been trying to contact her for several days and suspected she might be with me or at least in communication with me. Leon wanted to know my daughter's whereabouts. I informed him that I had no knowledge of her current residence, but I had indeed spoken with her recently about Kathy's pursuit of custody. I clarified that my intention wasn't to assist Leon but to provide Kathy with the opportunity to reconsider her decision. I hoped that Leon might convince her to return or even persuade her to relinquish her custody rights over our daughter. I shared this plan with my lawyer, who agreed it was a sound approach, as it could potentially save us time and energy by resolving the matter before it reached the courtroom. My hope was that Kathy would still want to reconcile with Leon and possibly leave me and our daughter in peace. In the third update, I shared that Kathy and I attended our first mediation session 2 days prior, which was unsuccessful. Kathy dismissed our discussions as futile and ended the session abruptly within 30 minutes. Upon returning home after picking up our daughter from school, Leon was waiting at our doorstep, appearing visibly distressed, likely due to the strain of his recent months with Kathy. I informed him that he needed to leave, as my daughter and I needed to unwind and didn't have the capacity to handle additional drama. Despite my efforts to assist him previously, I couldn't extend the same courtesy to someone who had been involved in an affair with my wife. Leon broke down, explaining that after their last argument, Kathy hadn't responded to any of his messages, leaving him unsure of where to find her. I reiterated that I had no information about her current residence and could not help him locate her. Leon sat on our porch steps, crying, and I grew increasingly frustrated. I felt that both he and Kathy had destroyed my life, and now he was comfortable enough to approach me for help in finding Kathy. I instructed my daughter to go inside and dealt with Leon, telling him that I was done with both of them. I provided him with Kathy's parents' contact information, advising him to reach out to them if he couldn't contact Kathy directly. I made it clear that he had ruined my life alongside Kathy and that I no longer wanted to see him. Despite his apologies and explanations about falling in love with Kathy, I remained silent and watched as he left. The constant exhaustion and confusion left me feeling directionless, and I desperately hoped that Leon and Kathy could resolve their issues independently. If they succeeded, it would mean my daughter and I could finally move forward without their interference. At this point, I felt numb, unable to process my emotions, and simply yearned for the situation to end. In my fourth update, I mentioned that a few days prior, Kathy had ended our mediation sessions, opting to take the matter to court, which would undoubtedly work against her. She visited me with Leon, whom I assumed they had reconciled. I chose not to invite them in because our daughter was home and feeling unwell, so I asked them to wait at a nearby cafe while my mother took care of our daughter. Once at the cafe, both Kathy and Leon apologized for the turmoil they had caused. However, I reiterated that their apologies no longer held any significance for me. I wanted them to move on and focus on why they had summoned me there. I refused to engage in further discussions filled with insincere apologies, prompting them to be direct about their intentions. They admitted that they had recognized their mistakes in betraying me and were unhappy with their lives in Boston. Kathy expressed missing our daughter, and Leon regretted not being his own boss anymore. Kathy requested that I allow our daughter to visit her every weekend or every other weekend, as she didn't want to relinquish her current lifestyle. Leon made an audacious proposal to return as a business partner and open a branch in Boston. The most frustrating aspect was their insistence that I make a decision within a few days because Kathy's employers required her to return to the office, making it impossible for her to continue working from home. Even if I had wanted to consider their proposals, I felt compelled to reject them outright. Leon had already resigned and sold his shares, and I had the documentation to prove it, leaving no room to hire him back as I no longer trusted him. Kathy's request was unreasonable. Our daughter did not deserve a life of constant travel just to see her mother, especially since Kathy had not considered the implications before moving to Boston. I argued that their actions were solely their responsibility and that I didn't need to feel guilty for their decisions. They attempted to negotiate, suggesting they were willing to find common ground because they preferred to avoid a courtroom battle. I dismissed this notion, pointing out that winning in court was unlikely for them and that their attempt to negotiate in person was merely a tactic to gain leverage. I made it clear that the most I could do was allow our daughter to meet Kathy whenever she chose to visit, but beyond that, I was unwilling to make any concessions. They had the option to accept or decline my terms, and Kathy seemed desperate enough to agree without resistance. After leaving the cafe, I planned to talk to my daughter once she felt better, ensuring that she wasn't forced into anything against her will. If she decided she didn't want to see her mother again, I would respect her decision without trying to persuade her otherwise. In the fifth update, I reflected on the passage of a few months since my last update. I reiterated that I wasn't going to force my daughter to interact with her mother if she didn't wish to. After our last interaction, I spoke with my daughter, explaining everything that had transpired and emphasizing that I didn't want to keep any secrets from her. She expressed a need for time to process her thoughts, and I conveyed the same sentiment to Kathy a few months prior. Since then, there had been no contact between us, and I was unaware of whether Kathy and Leon had managed to reconcile their differences. Frankly, I was indifferent to their relationship status, as long as they had left my daughter and me alone. From what I gathered, they were still together and residing in Boston, which meant they weren't causing any further disturbances in our lives. This separation allowed me the space to begin moving on, focusing on my work and raising my daughter to be a compassionate and strong individual, qualities I admired and valued, in stark contrast to her mother's actions. My hope was that I would succeed in this endeavor. To conclude, the most satisfying form of revenge was to live well and provide a stable, loving environment for my daughter. I concentrated on my business and our relationship, ensuring that my daughter grew up to be a good person, embodying the values I held dear. Her mother, Kathy, had demonstrated selfishness and disregard for our family's well-being, but I remained steadfast in my commitment to our daughter. Despite the challenges and emotional upheaval, I was determined to create a positive future for both of us, free from the toxicity that had previously disrupted our lives.